Hello and welcome. I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching NewsX World. In recent updates, President Donald Trump revealed that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is open to peace talks with Russia. He added that Zelensky is ready to finalise a crucial minerals deal with the US. This announcement follows a tense exchange at the White House between Trump, Vice President JD Vance and President Zelensky. The disagreement stemmed from differing views on Ukraine's defence strategy and the minerals deal. As a result, US military aid to Ukraine was temporarily suspended. During a congressional address, Trump read a letter from Zelensky expressing gratitude for US support and willingness to discuss peace. The international community is closely watching these developments, hoping for a peaceful resolution to the Ukraine conflict. Joining us to discuss this topic, we have Daniel Wagner, a CEO of Country Risk Solutions, joining us from Portland. We also have Andrea Lucidi, a war reporter in Moscow. We're joined also by Ruslin Bortnik, who is the director of Ukrainian Institute of Politics, who's joining us from Kyiv. And finally, Ross Feingold, a political risk analyst, who's joining us from Taipei. Ross, I would like to come to you first and explore the pausing of US aid to Ukraine. Now, we've heard from Mike Waltz in the last couple of hours that he expects this could be resumed if Ukraine comes to the table. Do you think Donald Trump is using this as a way of almost blackmailing Zelensky into holding these talks with Russia, potentially against his will?
I wouldn't refer to it as blackmail for the very simple reason that during the presidential campaign season throughout 2024, Trump had indicated that he was against further military aid to Ukraine. He had put pressure on American congressmen not to vote for the aid package that was approved last April. So I think he's carrying out what he said on the campaign trail, and this isn't really blackmail. He has a view about how to end the war, and now that he's been elected and sworn in as the President of the United States, he's trying his best to impose that view on the parties, whether that's Ukraine or Russia, but I wouldn't call it blackmail.
Andrea Lucidi, coming to you and looking at his comments saying that Russia is ready for peace talks. The Kremlin obviously has already held talks with the United States. How easy do you think it will be for those conversations to happen with Ukraine involved as well?
Well, this depends on the future negotiation between the US and Russia, because from months, the spokesman of the Kremlin, Dmitry Peskov, said that Russia is ready for a peace, for talking about peace in Ukraine, but we feel that it's not present in the public debate a realistic plan, a realistic program for the peace. So what effectively and what with realism Ukraine and the US can give back to Russia. What we need in this moment is something concrete, and I'm thinking that it's necessary to wait new negotiation between the US and Moscow, maybe in Turkey or in Saudi Arabia. But also it's news of today that Belarus proposed herself as a place for the future negotiation between Moscow and Ukraine, and this can be very interesting.
Ruslin Bortnik, I'd like to get a Ukrainian perspective on the seemingly easing of tensions between Vladimir Zelensky and Donald Trump. Do you think that this is something that can be rebuilt, and do you think the two can work together once again to try and find an end to this war?
I don't think that it's a fatal situation for Ukrainian and United States relations, because both countries are still interested in cooperation. United States is still interested in mineral deal with Ukraine, and United States is still interested in saving the control over the Ukrainian economy, political system, and so on, informal control. And Ukraine, of course, is still interested in support from United States, military, financial, and political support. So I think these common interests will be backing them together to the negotiation table again and again and again. Of course, the level of distrust was growing up during that scandal in the Oval Room, in the White House, and the level of distrust between the leaders are very high. And we need some time, and we need some very specific steps to come over this distrust. Ukraine needs to show their readiness to work together with Trump, to work with Trump's team, if Ukraine is willing to save this support. But I think Ukraine and the United States will, in any case, will cooperate in the future, in the best way, in the worst way. But we are still interested in this cooperation.
Yes, and Daniel Wagner, thank you very much for waiting while we spoke to our other guests there. It, of course, is not just US aid that has been paused to Ukraine. We're also hearing that some intelligence has been paused from going to Ukraine from the director of the CIA. What message is that sending from Donald Trump?
Well, the message that's being sent is my way or the highway, which is not a really good way to engage in quote unquote diplomacy. To take an alternative view from what my colleague Ross said, I view this approach as not only counterproductive, but I view it as extortion. If you want to get the very best from what your allies want to see at the end of the day, if you want to have an enduring and lasting peace, you don't get it by twisting someone's arm to the breaking point. And that's exactly what he's doing by withholding intelligence and withholding funding. You force them to do things they might not otherwise do. Now, if we want an enduring and a lasting peace, it's pretty obvious that all parties need to be at the table. And if you're going to apply pressure, it seems to me you want to be applying pressure equally among all of the parties. Trump is clearly not doing that. He's praising Putin every chance he gets. He's repeating his talking points. And by the same token, he's doing everything he can to make things difficult for Zelensky and Ukraine. I don't see how that's a recipe for success. Might they get to the table together? Yes, they will get to the table together eventually. But this kind of approach and the implication of what is likely to occur at the end of the day, wherein Putin gets everything he wants, Zelensky gets very little of what he wants, it's not going to work.
Ross, coming to you, we know potentially that Keir Starmer, Emmanuel Macron and Zelensky could all go and visit Donald Trump. The stance that Trump has taken, whether it's him being transactional or not, has clearly created some divide. So do you think that that can be rebuilt and there can be this transatlantic unity as we've seen in previous administrations? And also, do you think that the Europeans potentially can be part of any deal in support for Ukraine where that might have gone away from Donald Trump?
It's certainly ideal if the United States and the Western European countries are on the same page. That almost goes without saying. It would be impossible to have a peace deal in Europe without the involvement of the European powers, and especially with all the discussion about the potential for a European peacekeeping force. So at some point, the United States and Ukraine and the leading powers in Western Europe, like Germany, France, and the United Kingdom, they're going to have to be on the same page about what the way forward is. We're probably not there yet today. And even if Starmer, Macron brought Zelensky back to the White House, that would only be an initial meeting, and there'd still be a lot of work that has to take place after that. And ultimately, we all know that the key decision that has to be made by President Zelensky is he willing to accept that, at least in the near term, Russia is going to continue to occupy some of Ukraine's sovereign territory. As unpalatable as that might be for the president of Ukraine, that seems to be the direction that President Trump is pushing.
Ruslan Bortnik, I'd like to find out for the people how unpalatable it would be if Russia was able to keep hold of some of the territory that they had taken, the Ukrainian territory they had taken, in any peace deal.
Well, it's not an easy question because if we will analyze the sociological surveys and public opinion estimation, Ukrainian society now is divided in the three main groups. From 25 till 30% of Ukrainians are standing for the fight, for the continuation of the war, for the liberation of war-occupied lands. And this passionate part of society is most important from political view, from the view of management of the government, and so on and so on. The second part of society, it's also near the third, near the 30% of Ukrainians are standing for the freezing the conflict. They are standing for the ceasefire, for the ending of the war, but without any concessions to Russia, toward Russia, without any agreement with Russia. Just stop the war and make the wall between Ukraine and Russia, and no agreements. And another part, also near the third of Ukrainian society, are standing for the agreement, for the peace deal, and for some kind of new balance and concession toward Russia. So our society are very split in different positions, and of course estimation of the possible concessions, territorial concessions toward Russia is quite different. It depends on what part of society do you belong.
Andrea, we have heard from the Kremlin that they've welcomed Zelenskyy's letter that was read out by Trump in his first speech to Congress, but they say that nuances remain. How much give do you think Vladimir Putin will be willing to show in these negotiations, and do you think that potentially might cause a sticking point?
Well, Donald Trump, of course, needs to make his show for the American policy, but also Zelensky came in Washington with the intention to not agree such deal that practically can make Ukraine a new U.S. colony. But we hear the speech of Donald Trump at the Chamber of Representatives, and he repeat himself a lot of time, and he said that the U.S. wants something back for all this help, all this aid to Ukraine. And also, I think the only way that the U.S. have to have something back for this all this money and this military aid to Ukraine is to put the president of Ukraine in the position to accept everything that the leadership of Washington want that Ukraine will accept. Is really a bad situation for the head of Ukrainian state, but unfortunately I think it's the situation that all the requests from Kiev to the US are bringing Ukraine to, in this situation. And honestly, I see the only exit way for Ukraine is a peace deal with Russia. And unfortunately, also if, like our guest from Ukraine said, the 30% of Ukrainian population, maybe it's not for a deal with Russia. I think we need to be honest and to see the situation in the practical way. And a peace deal with Russia, it's the only way that can stop the war in the next short period. And of course, without, I repeat myself, without any negotiation between the US and Russia as first step for begin a future negotiation with Ukraine and maybe European Union, it's necessary. But I'm not sure about the role of the European Union, because now it seems that the European Union, especially after the speech of Donald Trump at the Chamber of Representatives, it seems that the European Union now wants to begin a parallel way for support Ukraine. But we need to be sure if the European Union can really support Ukraine alone with the military aid and, very important, the financial aid. Because without the financial aid from the West, the state machine of Ukraine cannot working. And unfortunately, this is a point that only few analysts are analyzed.
Yes, Daniel, I'd like to build on something that Andrea said there in terms of Ukraine doing what Washington wants, and part of that is signing this mineral deal. Now, previously, Zelensky was very staunch in saying that we need security guarantees. He even went as far as to say, I won't sell my country's future. But do you think now that we've had this blow up between the two of them and JD Vance in the White House, that Zelensky might have to concede and present this minerals deal without that guarantee? And then what impact could that have moving forward?
I do think he's ultimately going to have to sign this deal without the explicit security guarantees. But the way around that, and what I would like to see, is for an explicit guarantee that after peace has had a chance to settle, if for any reason the Russians reinvade or have some other form of aggression, that there is a clause in this agreement which says that NATO troops would automatically be sent into Ukraine. Now, Putin's not going to like that too much, but I don't know what he would expect. Could he expect an agreement where there are no security guarantees for Ukraine at all? That doesn't make any sense, because nobody's going to go for that on the Ukrainian side. This would not only keep the door open for Ukrainian membership of NATO, but it would also say to Putin, okay, we've got this deal, but you simply cannot do this again. That's what I think would be a good solution in the absence of an explicit security guarantee from the US.
Ross Feingold, I'd now like to take this conversation to a broader sort of area and look at the global geopolitical impact of this. We've spoken on this channel many times about China and Taiwan. Is there any impact in what a potential deal looks like across the world? Will any other countries be looking closely at how the US deals with this and how other NATO powers deal with this situation in the peace deal?
Certainly, there's been a lot of discussion about what the Trump administration's actions with regard to Ukraine and potentially a ceasefire or ending the war would mean for United States security alliances with other countries around the world. Here in Asia, people talk about what it might mean for the security agreement that the United States has with Japan, South Korea, and the Philippines. And then people also talk about what does it mean for the security relationship, no guarantee, but there is a close security relationship between the United States and Taiwan. There is no guarantee that the United States would come to Taiwan's aid in a war because there's no defense treaty with Taiwan or between Taiwan and the United States. It's a fair question to ask, but in analyzing that, there's just an incredible difficulty because it always comes down to the president at the time. President Trump has clearly shown a reluctance to engage the United States in military in actions around the world. He demonstrated that in his first term, other than some selected use of military force to capture or to kill terrorists. But a large-scale commitment of U.S. forces is something that President Trump has had a reluctance to do. So it's very difficult to answer your question because we don't know what a future president would do at the time that there's such a contingency situation. But President Trump has clearly shown a reluctance to use the U.S. military.
Yes, Andrea Lucidi, I'd like to come to you now and really look at what's happening on the ground. Strikes are taking place, Russian strikes are taking place in Ukraine. People are dying, there are injured. Of course, drones have been fired back and fighting is still fierce on the ground. How soon do you think that could end if peace talks do start?
Well, I was in Donbass 2 days ago, and what I saw there near the front line is I saw the situation usually. So from months, the initiative is in the hand of the Russian troops that they are continuing small advancing in the Ukrainian territory or in the territory that Russia reclaimed as new Russian territories. And the news that I read today about the stop of the sharing of intelligence information between Washington and Kiev can make the situation harder for Ukrainian troops because, okay, we know that the Ukrainian troops are problems about the amount of manpower, and this situation about the lack of information of the intelligence field can make problem for the defense of some strategic target in Ukraine, and also for new offensive plans for example, the usage of drones or long-range missiles, because the Ukrainian command can have only old intelligence information about the possible target in Russian territory. And unfortunately, for the Ukrainian army, the situation it's not very good. But since months, and in Donbass, what I saw a few days ago was the regularly advancing of Russian troops. And I think that if the negotiation will be not happen in short times, for Ukraine can be a very big problem to have the possibility to negotiate from a good position. In this moment, Ukraine has not a good position in a possible negotiation.
Yes, Andrea, I'm really sorry to interject and cut you off, but talking about that situation, we're just getting some information in. Sources in Ukraine say that all US intelligence was cut to Ukraine. They've had no communication for the past few hours. The quote is, a few hours ago, the exchange of all information was stopped. Daniel, I'd like to come to you, building off what Andrea said and building on that breaking news that we've just had as well. With Ukraine engaged in fighting as they are, drones, of course, infantry on the ground, how impactful would that have been for all US communications and all US intelligence to stop immediately?
Well, it's likely to be disastrous over time. I think the Ukrainians will find alternative sources of intelligence from various European governments. That's almost a certainty. I wouldn't be surprised if they find it from some other means as well, perhaps the Israelis or someone else. There's going to be an adjustment period that goes on here with both the funding and the intelligence being cut. It doesn't look very promising, and my view is that there's very little incentive for Putin now to come straight to the negotiating table. I think this is actually counterproductive to that. So the question in my mind becomes, how long will Putin delay coming to the table to take full advantage of the changing dynamics in the battlefield? He's got the cards now. He's been given the red carpet by Trump. He's been having his mortal adversary cut off by the United States. If I was him, I wouldn't be in a rush to go to the negotiating table. Let's see what happens.
Yes, and Ruslan Bortnik, to bring an end to this discussion, I would like your perspective on that. Putin's position is strong on the battlefield. It's now been made stronger in diplomacy with Trump's backing and with the withdrawal of US support to Ukraine, whether it's temporary or not. Where does that leave the people of Ukraine, and is there a fear that this war won't end with peace talks?
This decision about the intelligence information, I think this decision will make influence, especially on the presence of Ukrainian troops in Kursk region. Maybe this is the real target, to withdraw, to kick off Ukrainian forces from the Kursk region, which is a preliminary condition from the Russian side to start negotiation. Maybe this is a real goal in this process. In general, I'm not agree with my some colleagues, because the Ukrainian forces has a huge experience of fighting without any intelligence support from the West, from the United States, and even the most pessimistic evaluation of Ukrainian capabilities to continue this war, starting from 2 months till 9 months, of Ukrainian full capabilities to continue this war with any significant defeat.
Ruslan, thank you very much for your insight. Also, thank you to Andrea, Daniel and Ross for contributing. Of course, we will bring you everything as it comes through. This situation is changing hour by hour, day by day, but NewsX World is the place to get all your updates.